Hello and welcome to the brand new Mouth Off. And none of the guys have actually seen my costume, and if you look at them here, you'll see their reaction. It's Kickass, everybody. Kickass is 10 years old, and I don't know if you can hear a word I'm saying, but it was worth it just to see the guys' faces. And poor John looks like he's about to have a heart attack. So we are here today. I'll take this off in a minute because I can't actually see what I'm doing. But we are here today to talk about Kickass, to celebrate the fact that it is 10 years old. We don't know where that time has gone. I am joined today by three fabulous people. One of them is Paul Heath, all the way from Paul. Give us a wave there, Paul.
Hello there. How are you?
And Scott Davies, all the way from North London.
Hello.
And just down the road from there, we have John Lyas, who is also near Scott and North London somewhere. But I'm in South London. I'm in my lair. And today I am Kickass. Anyway,
you're gonna do the whole thing like that?
No, I can't. One, I can't breathe, and let's turn the music off. There we go. Fade out. One, I can't breathe. Two, I can't see anything, and I'm clicking buttons and stuff.
You'll be fine. Just click around.
It's got this quite cool eye thing. This is from Kickass too. This is official.
Yeah, I've
merch.
got something similar, but it's black and it's sort of a little bit more rubbery.
Why aren't you wearing it?
I don't want to know, Paul. Go.
Here we go. I'm gonna take it off.
Doing on a Friday night.
It's me.
Well, later.
It's Dave.
Right, oh, you got time.
Hey.
It's only the evening.
There he
Who
is.
knew? Who knew? I can hear and see better now. So yeah, we are here today. It's 10 years since Kickass was released. I think it was released yesterday in US cinemas. We may have got it a bit earlier actually, but yeah, we thought it would be a really nice celebration just to chat about it, what it means to us, how it impacted us, and why we love it, and also does it still stand up today. So I think Chloe, Grace Moretz, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Christopher Mintz-Plasse did a live stream last night on their Instagram where they talked for about 50 minutes about the film, what it means to them, and their memories from it. So if you haven't checked that out yet, you should after you finish watching this. But guys, let's just John had the good idea that we'll start off with our superhero names. Now, obviously today I'm Kickass, so this is, it doesn't. That's me done. Guys, I'm sorry, but you've let the side down. What are your superhero names? Go, Paul.
Well, I've had about 4 minutes notice of this, so I'm going to go with my school nickname, which was the Beefer. And I'm from a part of the country where the R's are like the Beefer. So I'm going to stick with that. So if I was ever a superhero, because I'm obviously naturally muscular as well, it sort of suits me even to this day. So yeah, the Beefer.
Scotty?
I've monikered myself as the procrastinator.
I like it.
Because I am.
That's me most of the time. John of the Lyas?
So I decided not to go with your normal muscly caped crusader, and I'm going to go for a sort of a more suave 60s super spy, secret agent type one. I'm going to be called Chamberlain Fist. And my big power is that I get a massive fist when I get angry or when I get emotional or whenever sometimes. So that's my thing.
So the aim for this is to make John angry enough that his fist just gets absolutely explodes.
Oh, stop it.
Oh, there it's big already. It's terrifying.
I hate to say it, but it's your super. I can't say it live on air. I just can't. I can't say it. I can't. I just can't.
Right.
But I think you all know what I mean to say. What your superpower really is.
Remember, it's a family show, sort of.
It's a hold myself back.
Yeah, it's a family show, but we're talking about an R-rated superhero. I love it.
This is true too. Well, we'll get into that.
I love it.
So yeah, this is much more fun if you guys all get involved. So do subscribe if you don't already. But main thing, like, and please put comments in the comment section. Let us know what your memories of Kickass are. And yeah, why you love the movie, or if you don't love the movie, why. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe, and look, there's a little button that appears over my face. So guys, let's start off by just talking about what our memories of Kickass are, and what does it mean to you. John, do you want to start?
Yeah, because this is something that was a bit of a big deal for us, because on the site we started about I'm not sure, about a year before Kickass came out, and it took us a long time to get invited to things and to go to premieres and stuff. And this was one of the films that we got a lot of access to. So we spoke to all the cast and the directors and Jane Goldman, the writer, and it was really exciting to sort of see something that had a really British flavour in these American superhero films. There was a lot of it was all very serious at the time, and because we were right in the middle of Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, and I think that to have something that was very, very bright, very colourful, and a bit subversive was actually really good fun. It was violent and it was vicious, and it had a really strange kind of flavour of like almost East End gangsters in Stan Lee's New York, and it was a really great performance by all the leads. But I really liked Mark Strong. I thought he was just fantastic in it, and I haven't seen it for an awful long time, and that's one of the things I want to talk about is not only what it was like then, but also what did it do to the superhero genre. But we'll get into that a bit later. I just remember it being a lot of fun and it being a much needed shot in the arm to superhero films at the time. What about you guys? What did you think?
Shall I go? So,
Go for it, Paul.
yeah, similar to you, John. It's a bit of a nostalgia trip for me. It's 2010, so it's kind of around about the time that I met you guys. If you remember that, I don't think it was.
You've never looked back.
Specifically, it wasn't specifically around Kickass, but it was certainly that year. And I watched the film earlier on today because I don't think I've watched it since it was released. So, and just looking back, actually, a lot of things come back to you, and that reminds you and sort of kickstarts memories of other things that happened around about that time. So, and you're right, it was about the growing of the sort of the blog sort of scene amongst all of us, and obviously that's when we started to meet one another, and big events back then that we're all invited to. They don't really do those anymore, so it's
all about
kind of
YouTube,
nice to sort of think back to those glory days, those early glory days when necessarily money wasn't as much as an issue as it is potentially now, and there's the competition. It wasn't as much then, and it was just a lovely time. But as for the film itself, it's just refreshing today as it was back 10 years ago. It's really good to watch, everyone. So I'm glad you reminded me it was celebrating its birthday. So yeah, it's good to be able to chat about it.
Awesome. Scott, what about you?
Well, this was before any of I did all of this stuff with you guys. So I was a normal cinema goer back then. So I think I saw it at my local cinema with my usual bunch of friends that we used to go to the multiplex together. And I think we got sold on the fact that it was a superhero movie, but also the fact that it had Nicolas Cage in, which is a favourite of many people, I'm sure. I remember seeing it and being really impressed with it. It was very different. Obviously, as John said, it was a year or two after we'd had The Dark Knight, and that had obviously peaked the superhero genre beyond what it had ever gone before in many ways. And this felt like, as you said before, a shot in the arm. That it was very different. It was a very colourful sort of comic book movie, but at the core of it was this very violent, very R-rated movie that held no punches, and it really kind of revolutionized. And obviously we're going to talk about it as we go, but it set the tone for a lot of movies that have followed in the sort of 10 years, the decade since it debuted. I think it was a trendsetter in many ways, and quite a quiet trendsetter. It wasn't a huge kind of, I don't think it took just under 100 million at the worldwide box office, I think, or at least in the US. So it wasn't like a huge blockbuster, but quietly its tone and the way it went about telling the story has influenced quite a lot going through the 10 years since then. So I think it's been quite revolutionary, and there's a lot of movies we wouldn't have got if this hadn't kind of taken those risks. Because at that time superhero movies were being quite, apart from the Batman movies, X-Men had kind of died, and I think we'd had the 3 Spider-Man movies, and the third one hadn't done quite well. So it was a time where people weren't taking the risks that they have been now. And I think Matthew Vaughn and the guys, Mark Millar and all those guys that took a risk with the comic book really set a trend, and I think it's still being felt today in many ways. So I really, really enjoyed it. It was so much fun, and had that, I always remember that, that, what's that song? The la 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 la.
Yes,
is it the Banana?
I think it's
the Banana Bliss.
Yeah, amazing. Chloe Moretz's hit girl going mad on all the henchmen. That was a great scene. That really.
Yeah. Yeah, really well, really good, that one. So,
So
yeah, I
many
think in
good
many
scenes.
ways it's the impact of it, even though it wasn't like this super massive billion-dollar franchise. I think its influence is still being felt today, and that's a very good thing.
You say that about the fact that it was a time when there were fewer risks being taken, but does anyone remember James Gunn's film Super, which came out?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Then? That was really fantastic, and if you haven't seen it, it's one of those films that almost came out of nowhere. Even though it had Rainn Wilson, Ellen Page, and it was directed by James Gunn, obviously, who's done Guardians of the Galaxy and so much more since then. It was such a subversive film. It was almost like a Kick-Ass taken to the next level, and it was one of the films that I used to get frustrated that more people hadn't seen, because I think people say, "Oh, look, Kick-Ass is the one that's the more subversive," when actually it's far more like what had come before. So it's interesting to see that in that year, or in those couple of years, there were risks being taken, probably because at the start of the decade you had X-Men, and then you'd had Blade and Hellboy, and you'd had Superman Returns, and it's almost like that decade had kind of killed what was exciting about superhero films at the time. And then there were new things starting to come out. So those two films, Super and Kick-Ass, were kind of cut from the same cloth a little bit. So yeah, it was a really interesting time. Dave, what are your fancy memories from it?
I think so. Paul and I were just chatting before this started, and I think YouTube obviously existed in 2010, but it wasn't anywhere like what it is now. You didn't have YouTubers who are going to events to promote product. It was all about bloggers, and that's what we did. And so, you guys started in November 2008. So April 2010, when this film came out, this was all new. So, like, the first premiere we ever went to was the Star Trek, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek film, and we were invited to a really early screening of Kick-Ass by Universal Direct, by the studio. So this was like, what do you mean? It was all new. John and I used to send John messages just saying "ring me" with 15 exclamation marks, because we had full-time jobs. We didn't do this for a job then, and so it was a really exciting time. And it's placed, like Paul said already, it's where I met Paul. People like I think I may have met Kassam Luch there, and various other people. So it was a really special time, I think, for us as movie fans, to think we've started a website that people are actually reading, and not only that, but we're getting to see films before other people did. And then when that film is Kick-Ass, you go, okay, this is awesome. And I don't know, Kick-Ass is just a special film. That it was very, I think they invited the blogs to come and see it early, just because it was that sort of film that was going to attract a more indie type of people, and that's where proper movie fans. I think it became bigger than that, but that's the sort of where Universal were aiming for it to go. And so by inviting us, the idea was for us to sort of push it if we liked it, which we did, and off it went. And yeah, John, do you want to mention how we got involved in the home entertainment release of this film?
Do I want to mention it? I've been waiting for.
I don't want you to mention it
for a long
but
time. You should.
I mean, you thought this was bad. It's going to get worse for me in a moment. But John, take it away.
No idea. If you guys haven't seen this, most of you haven't seen it, you are in for an absolute treat. For the Blu-ray DVD release of Kick-Ass, we were asked to put together some sort of viral video. And as you can see on the screen now, Dave was sent a Kick-Ass costume. And we decided that what better to do than to go down to London and terrify the local populace with Dave dashing down the South Bank and attacking Parliament. Oh, yes, you nasty politicians, oh, etc. And talking to other people, along with that's Dr. Amazing, I think, from Justice Force 5.
So let's just talk about them. So I can't remember how, but there was a film called Superhero Me, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he's probably what was it?
Steve Sales.
Well done, Steve Sales, right? And so he'd made this film called Superhero Me, and in Superhero Me were these guys that you can see on screen now. And so I don't know how it happened, but I think I emailed him and said, "Look, we want to make a film," and there's John, and so can you come to London and help us film this movie? I mean, I don't know what we were thinking. And anyway, so
amazing.
We went to South Bank and we shot this film in inverted commas to promote Kickass home entertainment release.
That's the hero shot.
Bear in mind, this is 10 years old. So big respect to the guys who made this. I think there's a chap called Brendan Connolly who edited it for us and put it together and shot it. So I can't even remember the storyline of this.
There was no storyline. What are you talking about? There was no storyline.
Yeah.
It was just these weirdos running about, terrifying people.
I mean, what's going on
here? I have
here?
No idea what happened. But
we did actually go to one of the places where they shot the film. I'm shouting something. Yeah. Anyway, let's get rid of that awful. No,
that's
shot.
Great. I swear to you, if you're interested, please tell us because we can put the whole thing up. It's about 10 minutes, and I've got
I've never seen it.
Seriously,
Paul's going to pay for that.
But it's not only. I mean, the thing is, it's not only a silly video, which we all enjoyed doing. It was really good fun to be involved with and get to do. But it was a sign that back then they were, getting bloggers to do ridiculous stuff, and we enjoyed it because it was a nice day with silly people promoting a film that we liked. So it was kind of in keeping,
When we said we'd do it, I don't think. Because they told us that the suit that I'm wearing was one of the actual suits in the movie. I don't think it was. And bear in mind, the suit in the movie is like a wetsuit. So I was running around. It was on South Banks, and it was. I think it was hot. And I just remember running around being really hot in that thing. John realised he dodged a bullet and didn't have to do it. But it was good. And looking back, it was worth doing. I think just for the memories to talk about it now.
Yeah, it was worth it just for that, wasn't it? But
I'm so glad I didn't do that.
You definitely turned that one down.
That could have been you.
Yeah, me too. That would have been fun, wouldn't it?
So let's move on a bit. And guys, if you're listening again, if you're watching, please do let us know your comments in the comments below. Tell us your comments in the comments below, and let us know what you think of Kickass. What does it mean to you? Where was the first place you saw it? And why is it? If you think it holds up. And let's talk about that now. So guys, does the movie still hold up today, 10 years later? John, what do you think?
Yes, it does, because it kind of exists in its own little space. It was made in a time when, like I said before, it needed to be something quite different. And I think that the strength of the characters and the performances are such that it is the kind of film that you can always sit down and enjoy for what it is. It's interesting that when it came to the sequel, it didn't do quite as well, probably because it was a movie about with a story that was just complete. It didn't need to be bigger, and I think in a time when there were so many sequels and so many franchises being built, stories kind of being meted out, bit by bit, it was nice to have something that felt new, complete, and different, and didn't look like anything at the time. And it's interesting because I'm not going to spoil very much, but at the very beginning, there's a superhero, not one of the main cast, but a real life superhero, who attempts to fly off of the top of a building. It doesn't go very well. And the thing is, it's shot so well, and it's the timing of the editing and the way it's shot is just so funny, and it's so unexpected what happens to this guy that really sets the tone. You would never have seen that in any other film. Back then. Right now, we'll talk about this a bit later, but films like Deadpool have kind of taken that element to it and then stretched it out to become the fabric of the whole film. But I don't know, it's not a film that's come up very often in the last 10 years, Kickass. So it's quite nice for it to be rediscovered on its 10th anniversary. I think it really holds up because it was really good, and I think it's going to remain really good. What about you, Paul? What do you fancy?
Yeah, so I watched it earlier on today, and I hadn't seen it since probably 2010. So at that screening. So I mean, this is a time when we just had Iron Man. Was that 2008? So then we had possibly Iron Man 2, or was that a little bit later? So the Marvel Universe hadn't really established itself, and it's come such a long way since. So if you look at a film like Kickass, which was before all that, and totally different in tone, obviously. As a superhero film, it does stand up, and it's by looking at the film, I forgot who was in it. I mean, Dexter Fletcher's in there for a start, and again we'll come up onto this in a minute in terms of the legacy. So Jason Fleming and all these other people that have gone on to do amazing things like Dexter Fletcher. I think this ties in with Marv as well, where he made Rocket Man last year. And Jason Fleming obviously went into the X-Men films, also directed by Matthew Vaughn. And I've just forgotten all about that sort of stuff. All I remember about Kickass is the green costume and then the profanity and obviously Hit Girl and her stealing the show. And watched it today. If that was made today, I think, yeah, I mean, in terms of, without all the aging of the actors that I've just mentioned, you'd think that was made today, because it's so refreshing and so new that, I think that no one's had the balls to make a film like that, except for Logan and Deadpool since, and that's only recently. Don't forget, this was 10 years ago. So I think it's done well. The
look of the film was exceptional as well, wasn't it? So the whole thing was shot in, I think there was some external shot in New York, but actually 95% of the film was shot in London. So it was Pinewood Studios, and then but it, like that opening scene that you mentioned, John, it's as New York can be. I think you wouldn't have said it was a studio in London somewhere.
No, and that was the thing. I think that, but like I said, there is a real London, England, British kind of characteristic to it, which is unusual, and it's not the kind of thing that we see particularly often. So I think it just separated it a little bit, which is great.
Do you think that's due to the writing of Jane Goldman, who's Jonathan Ross's wife, and she wrote the movies? She's a very, very talented writer. We got to speak to her back then, and you can see the interview on the website. But she's just a genius, I think.
Yeah, she's got obviously Mark Miller, who wrote the comic book. He's Scottish, so there's definitely a distinct flavour to the project, which it was influenced by America, but obviously it wasn't American. And I think that's something which is really interesting to look at, and I think it still is one of the reasons why it kind of holds up today.
Yeah, I should clarify that. So Mark Miller wrote the comics, and then Jane Goldman wrote the screenplay. I think with Mark Miller, was he involved as well?
I'm not sure. I think Matthew Vaughn would have done it.
That's a question for Scott.
Yeah, just Matthew Vaughn and Jane Goldman did the screenplay.
Right. Yeah.
Produced by Brad Pitt. Did you know that? I've forgotten that.
I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
So there's a connection there between the Guy Ritchie films from 10 years before that with Snatch, and obviously Matthew Vaughn produced those, right? So there's this massive 20-year sort of connection going on between all these films, which we'll talk about in a minute. Yeah.
Scott, what about you? Let's move to you.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. I think that the risks that it took at a time when, like Paul said about there was no MCU really at the time, and the only thing we had at that time was Nolan's Batman movies. But I think, over the years before that, when we'd had Superman and Spider-Man and X-Men, everything became very familiar, and I think people were quite hungry for something that was a little bit different. And it proved with this that you could take the tropes and everything of this particular genre, but twist them in such a way that made them feel a little bit more adult, but also made them feel a bit real. There's a grittiness to it, but there's also a fun to it. And you can look at, I'm not saying it's completely influenced, but you can see little flashings of like the Edgar Wright, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost's kind of way of doing things. There's a little bit of the Seth Rogen kind of, not the stoner stuff, but the way that him and Judd Apatow and those guys made their comedies. There's a little bit of that in there. So I think all those elements come together really well. I have to say as well that the chemistry between the leads, between the cast, between the three guys, and also Nicolas Cage and Mark Strong, makes it very strong. This film is, you can kind of have all the imagination in the world, but unless the core of that cast work, particularly with this, the way this isn't just about one superhero. This isn't a Batman or a Superman or anything. The focus is on this kind of strange group dynamic, and the four of them together really, really work very well. And also, I mentioned before, the fact that you then get Nicolas Cage in there doing his amazing Adam West impression.
Go on, Scott.
And just nailing every single... I know I can't do it.
Go on, Scott.
I refuse to. No, because earlier when I did it, I sounded like William Shatner, so I won't. I can't really do Adam West. It looks like that scene where he's shouting, it looks like the same scene from the bees in The Wicker Man.
Yeah, really bad.
Yeah, this was a slightly better film than that, though.
Yeah, slightly better.
But
yeah, I think all of the ingredients, I think even, as I said, you can have a great script and everything else, but unless you have all the other elements, a great cast, great director, the look and feel of the film, all those underpinnings of, the comedy, where the comedy comes from, where the action comes from, all that kind of stuff, unless you put all those together, I think this marries all of those things really, really well. And like John said, the freshness of it, I think, is what makes it not just stand out then, but has stood the test of time because it has that unique energy to it. I think that's why it's held up for 10 years. It's mad talking about it now. 10 years, it's just insane.
That is insane, isn't it? One thing that it made the media for at the time, let me see if this works, was this.
Have you got?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Nicolas Cage shooting his daughter, who is an 11-year-old Chloe Moretz, in the chest. That made the news. Unsurprisingly, there's a. I'll do it one
Do you
more time
remember?
here.
Do you remember when on the day that we interviewed Jane Goldman, M. Breen, who was one of our writers, she reminded me of this today. The Daily Mail were obviously very against it. So, of course, it's going to be a great film. But they were really against it, and they wrote some very nasty things about Jane Goldman.
# satire.
At the time of doing our interview. So, somewhere we've got a Daily Mail that we took to the interview and asked her to sign. And it was one of our most prized possessions because...
Who did the junket? Did you do it?
No, M did it.
Oh, sorry, M did the junket.
Yeah, she took it, and I think either we've got it on video somewhere, but she goes, look, have you seen this? And Jane Goldman was like, yes. Could you sign it? And so she came away with this, with this Daily Mail signed by Jane Goldman, which was kind of like a,
that's glorious.
Of honor, really. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
We've got some great comments coming in. Sorry, Scott. I just read this comment. So chap called Joseph has come in and said he didn't go to see the film when it first came out, but later his cousin, who's a big comic book fan, told him that he'd love it. So he rented it, and it's become his favourite all-time movie, which is really cool.
Nice, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And another chap here, Sean, has said that as good as the teens were in the movie, it was all about Mark Strong and Nick Cage, and Chloe Moretz. Talk about kicking ass. Sequel was a dud. Then we had Mark in the Shazam movie, yay.
That's true.
Yeah, and Joseph's also saying Hit Girl stole the flick, which I think one of you guys said earlier as well.
Yeah,
really did.
Yeah.
There's a long time there was talk about Chloe Moretz coming back to do a third film, but like a Hit Girl film. But the fact that the sequel didn't do very well, I think, says quite a lot about how much you could stretch out the characters, because her journey was a really important part of the film, which was really nice to see. Has to be about more than just a kid, usually a boy or a male, discovering he's got superpowers and everything. So that element of the story was so nice to have in, about this girl and this father kind of trying to relate after some terrible incidents. And I think that's fascinating, and that's still my favorite part of the movie. We can all laugh at the Daily Mail having chickens over the fact that Nicolas Cage shot Chloe Moretz in the chest, but if that was all the film was, then it wouldn't be as good as it was. There had to be more to it than that. So it's nice that A, we annoy the Daily Mail, and B, we get something more than just your generic superhero story.
Sean has come back with your. He's in agreement by saying the Daily Fail in the comments here as well. So.
Good man.
You get on with him. So the second film didn't live up to the first by any means. I think one thing. So I remember reading the graphic novel, the Mark Millar graphic novel, and one thing that stands out was the fact that the graphic novels. You think the movies are violent. The graphic novels are way more so. I mean, just look at some of the imagery from it. And I don't know. So the second film attempted to follow the graphic novel, but it just didn't live up to it. Why do you think that was? What was it about it that didn't have the same wow factor that the first film did?
For the sequel,
yeah,
I think it sounds like that's just such a generic thing to say, but I think the fact that Matthew Vaughn didn't do it, and the fact that I don't think Jane Goldman did it, I think that was a massive a massive loss, because I think it was them, as Paul said, you know, they were the ones that kind of helped conceive it as a film experience with Mark Miller and those guys, and the artist, I can never remember his name, but I think I think because they captured all of those things so well, and their sensibilities are so in tune. I mean, if you look at, you know, they did obviously did Stardust together, and then obviously gone on to do the Kingsman stuff together. I think the way they gel, and they did X-Men First Class together as well. The way that they gel and the way that they were able to take the material and make it into a tangible film. I think when you lose that element, I think that's a big reason why it failed. And like you say, it's one of those where, even though there were comic books, you know, was there enough room, as John said, for a sequel? And, you know, you can have as many comic books as you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be making a sequel. And yeah, it fell, I think, because it lost all of the sensibilities that it had in the first one. I think that was a big reason for it failing. I don't know what you guys think.
John, what do you reckon?
And didn't it just... so there's about 3 years in between films, 3 or 4 years, is that right?
Yeah, it was longer than they wanted.
I think it was 3.
So obviously the world, in terms of, like we were just talking about the MCU, that had obviously kicked off by then. So I think the cinema-going public were very much in a different place by the time the second film came out. So these connected worlds had started to sort of, you know, come out. And then obviously there's this film called Kickass where, you know, was it largely forgotten by that point, and we'd moved on to the next big thing, which obviously was this Marvel behemoth that had started to happen. I vaguely remember I was lucky enough to go to Comic-Con one year. I think Kickass was there, and that was around about the time of Age of Ultron. So we were well into the Marvel universe by then, and the characters coming together in one massive film. And this just seemed like a second-rate sequel, to be honest. You know, and that's how I felt when I saw it.
It's the same, because I remember when the sequel was announced, they had to write the book, I think, for the sequel. I don't think it was like a pre-existing thing, and I got a copy of the book, and I remember going through it thinking I'd be interested to see what happens to them. And there's a couple of scenes in it that are so violent that could not be shot. And there's just no way. And I remember looking at it thinking, how on earth are they going to do this? Because it's integral to this kind of story they're doing, but also it's way too violent. In the end, they didn't do it. They did something slightly similar, but the comic book goes to places you could never go to. Certainly not as part of a you know, like not a family friendly film franchise, but, you know, a profitable one. But it's like when they brought in Jim Carrey to be you know, in the second film, it was almost as if they were trying to up the stakes in terms of what they were showing and what they were bringing to it without doing the same thing to the story. And I remember I was on the radio, I think, and I remember I was reviewing this, and I remember saying to the presenter, I can't remember who it was, and I said, can I say Kickass on BBC? And she was like, yeah, you can say it, it's absolutely fine. But I had to check, you know, because it's the BBC. But I remember at the time I said it was as if it's as if Hollywood had remade Kickass into its own film. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like how you have Hollywood remaking so many sort of foreign classics. It's as if Hollywood remade Kickass and left out all of the good stuff in it. So it was really disappointing, and I think that's just what killed it dead, because you had a great film followed by a really lackluster sequel, and no one was interested. It turns out we get things like Kingsman, which is great, you know, because I think Kingsman was a lot of fun, and I think the Kingsman sequel suffered a little bit from the same problems that the Kick-Ass sequel did, but that's sequels, isn't it? So
yeah, these films are lightning in a bottle, right? So it's hard to replicate something again, and that's why sequels are such a hard thing to get right, and that's why Marvel have done such a good job, because it's not just sequels, it's merging so many different storylines into one.
And it's continuation story, like, you know,
constantly
like, we all binge watch TV these days, don't we? Because we love a continuation. We love see how things develop over a long period of time, and that's what the Marvel movies do. Kick-Ass hasn't got that in it, fortunately. So
no. I did get to go to set for the second one, so I was super happy about that, and I got to interview all the guys there. But there's no photos of that, unfortunately. You're not allowed to.
Did you do Elton John to get to interview him?
He wasn't there on that day. It was all the three leads. Yeah, I know.
Was it, mate?
Paul, were you there?
No, I believe I was on the set of something else that day.
Were you? Yeah, the set of your kitchen.
Yeah, something much bigger.
The set of your kitchen.
Yeah, probably having the kitchen done. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's talk a bit about the legacy that it's. We've already touched on this a bit. Scott, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. So like we spoke about before, the legacy, because of it's very different to all the other movies that we've had, be it the MCU, be it Nolan's Batman movies, be it even things like X-Men and all those kind of things that have been revamped and rebooted over the years. It in many ways set the tone for Deadpool to finally be made into a film. Not completely directly, but I think seeing something that took risks was very different to what we were doing, trying to keep everything fresh. When, as Paul said, the MCU was kind of taking over and everything else. I think it was time for those things to be a little bit more fresh. And I think this did set the tone for something like Deadpool to be, a viable thing. Because if Ryan Reynolds and all those guys had tried to make Deadpool for donkey's years before they actually got to do it in 2015, 2016. And then obviously a few years later, we got Logan, which is the kind of Wolverine movie that a lot of people wanted to see and Hugh Jackman wanted to make for a long time, and took a lot of convincing in terms of convincing the studio to give him the money and to give him the leeway to go and make something like Logan, which is very, very different to his appearances in X-Men and the previous Wolverine movies, which are quite soft in some regards when you've got a character like Wolverine. So I think in terms of that, I think Kickass, even though it was a smaller budget and not a hugely recognizable cast, I think it proved that if the material was strong enough and you had the right filmmakers and you go after the right tone, that you could make a more adult skewed superhero movie that dealt with a lot of interesting themes and a lot of darker themes that weren't necessarily in movies like Doctor Strange or Thor. You could give it a grittiness and a kind of a realness to it that some of them don't really have. And I think that was key in getting something like, especially Deadpool. I mean, Deadpool is such a unique character in his own right in the comic books anyway, and does things that no other comic book character does. There he is. And it's the same with Kickass. It's maybe it's not quite as violent as comic books, but it took a lot of risks. There was a lot of swearing. I think John mentioned about the Daily Mail thing. I think it also got in trouble when that clip of Chloe Moretz saying the C word when she was about 11 didn't go down very well. But I think it proved that in some respects with the superhero movies, you could have your cake and eat it too, in the sense that you could go and enjoy the MCU, you could go and enjoy X-Men or whatever, but then you could have more adult skewed ones like Deadpool and like Logan that really tapped into really dark, really interesting themes that we wouldn't get in the kind of more glossy superhero movies. So I think that's still being felt today, and I think that's one of the movies. And then you could look back and say things like Blade as well. That was a much darker movie than some of the others, and I wouldn't expect the new Blade would be quite as dark now that he would be part of the MCU. I think that would be slightly held back, but yeah, I think there's definitely a through line for those movies. And I think looking at the 10 years, I mean, Paul, you watched it today. I mean, does all of those kind of risks that it took, do you still feel them today, and do you still feel that its impact is quite big?
100%, because I'd forgotten a lot of it. A lot of the controversy, obviously, isn't, you're not reading about that now. You're 10 years on. So if that was presented today, I think in today's world, would still be shocked. The scene that you showed with Chloe Moretz being shot. I mean, that I was like, oh, I forgot that happened. Wow. Blimey, I couldn't see Disney, who would now potentially, it was a Fox film, right? So it's owned by Disney now, I'm guessing. So, hello?
Can you imagine that's going to be on Disney Plus as a kind of a family-friendly cut? It'll be about 4 minutes long.
That's right. And it's just like, so yeah, it still hit home quite hard, to be honest. I think for me, though, sorry to go on, but the legacy for me is just where these filmmakers were at this point 10 years ago, and I touched on it earlier on, and where they all are now. And it shows us this big family that have sort of progressed through these films. I think Matthew Vaughn's first film was Layer Cake, and then he as a director, and then
Daniel Craig did all right, didn't he? After that,
Yeah, he did all right. That set the sort of laid the foundations for a certain super spy. You know, a couple of years later, and then you find out that the guys that are in this. So Dexter Fletcher goes on to direct Rocket Man, and you know.
But even the likes of Mark Strong, all the cast, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, I think this is a shot from the second film. It wasn't until I was going through photos today that I remembered the minigun.
Yeah.
What a scene that was. And Chloe Moretz, she did The Equalizer. She did what else did she do with I can't remember his name. But anyway, she's gone on to bigger and better things constantly. So yeah, the cast in this film, Aaron Taylor-Johnson obviously has been in numerous movies, after this. So yeah, it is astonishing. There's films like this and TV shows that you can, like Skins. I think about this often. How these TV shows that just have, you look at the sort of an old photo from however long ago that was, 15 years ago, and everybody in it. Will Poulter, Dev Patel, list them off. I've never even seen Skins, but I just know some of the people in it. But they're just all megastars now. And this was one of those moments.
The filmmakers behind Skins as well. They've gone on to massive things, themselves. So I can't name them now, but there's some massive directors that
You're as good as
found
me.
their feet on Skins. I should have done research, shouldn't I?
Yeah, no, I didn't do either. Yeah, useless. So we've got Scott. Scott knows his stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, he's looking up now.
I was thinking of, obviously in terms of the actors, there was obviously Kaya Scodelario and Nicholas Hoult.
That's right. Kaya was another
Skins,
one. Yeah.
Wasn't there as well?
I'm sure there was more than that though.
There was more than that. I'm just thinking off the top of my head what they were. So
Dev Patel was definitely in it, wasn't he?
Yeah, Dev Patel was in it. Will Poulter was in it.
Yeah, we're useless. Anyway, Skins
Doesn't
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I've got a picture here. Who do I recognise? Nobody, other than Kaya. Useless. Yeah. Can we talk about Big Daddy and Nick Cage? Because we've touched on him, but we haven't really given him the credit he deserves. Go on, Scott.
Oh, he's so good in this movie. This might actually be his last good film.
I was thinking that.
Was it like director?
He's still kicking them out, mate. He's still doing it.
But, come on.
I'd watch him paint the walls, mate. Honestly, I'd watch him paint my walls in here.
Nicolas
Cage. Freak it out. Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
I love him.
Love Nicolas Cage and everything. He is the best. I actually saw the clip we were talking about, the clip from Wicker Man that popped up on my YouTube the other day. It's just brilliant. But yeah, he's so good, and I love the fact that he used Adam West as his kind of basis to do the character, particularly when he's in the costume. He is Batman from 1960s, isn't he? He's the way his tone and everything. I mean, the suit is very Batman-esque anyway, isn't it? In terms of the look, it is literally just missing the ears in many ways. But I love the fact that you get that thing in superhero movies where, like with Batman, if he wears the cowl, when he takes the cowl off, the eye makeup's disappeared. But with Big Daddy, the opposite, where he has to he extends his moustache so he doesn't have to shave his moustache off.
Yeah, that other shot was better.
It's always brilliant. But he's so good, and he helps to kind of bring everything. He's kind of like he brings the mix of everybody together so well. He allows the kids to play their characters and stuff, and he's kind of the center, isn't he? He's kind of the old guard, if you like, helping to bring everything together. And I think he's so good in that film. And there's such a, like John was saying, the rich emotional backstory between him and Hit Girl, his daughter, and what they've been through and what he's been through in the years is quite hard hitting particularly towards the end. When he's having to. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but there's a few hard hitting scenes in there where you kind of hear about his backstory, and it's quite sad. It's quite emotional in places. So I think he helps to raise the bar even higher by just being Nick Cage, and he does that in most stuff, I think. Well, most stuff, not all stuff. Some stuff he shouldn't.
The Rock is still one of my all-time.
Bowl.
The Rock is still one of my all-time favourite films. So, and my friend Jake is a massive Nick Cage fan. So shout out to Jake. We've got another comment. Joseph's just come back and said the original movie changed the way Big Daddy was done. In the original graphic novel, he was a real jerk, and his wife Mindy's mother was still alive. So I've read the second graphic novel. I've not read the first one. So that's an interesting take. So that was completely changed, and I guess, but you did really feel sorry for him in the movie. Losing his wife and to being this dad who just wants the best for his daughter, even though he ends up shooting her in the chest to make her stronger. But hey, we all do that, right? No.
It's a rite of passage. Every parent has to go through that.
Not so much. So, yeah, I think, unless I'm missing anything, that's us sort of done with Kickass. I mean, is there anything, guys, that you want to sort of say as a lasting memory?
I think it's one of those films that was of its time, that came at just the right moment, that can never be sort of resurrected. You can't do a reboot. You can't. They shouldn't have bothered with a sequel. But you know, it's one of those films of its time that a bit like Shaun of the Dead, in the sense that there are millions of zombie films, but there's only one Shaun of the Dead. And I think in the pantheon of comic book movies, there will always be thousands and thousands of entries, but there'll only be one Kick-Ass. And I think that's probably something worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Scotty?
Yeah, I think they're right. I think a lot of the cast have said, because of the way that Kick-Ass 2 kind of went, that Kick-Ass 3 wouldn't go down very well. But then they were talking about it on the Instagram live yesterday.
Well, I think there's a comic. There is a comic.
Yeah, there is a comic. Yeah, there is a comic. Yeah. As John said, doesn't necessarily mean you should make, just because you've made Shaun of the Dead, you shouldn't make loads of Shaun of the Deads or whatever. But I think they were talking about yesterday about the fan love for the characters and everything is substantial enough that it always comes up, doesn't it? Every time that they get together, like we did yesterday, it always kind of comes up. I think even I read somewhere that Matthew Vaughn was looking to maybe reboot it as a TV series or something, or everything else. So, potentially, but I think that the first film is so well done and everything works so well that to do a reboot just seems a bit criminal, really. But hey, maybe a TV show, they can do it in a different way and tell the story in a different way. But I think it should just be, a line should be drawn underneath it and just leave the first one as it is. I don't even think, as John said before, I don't think we ever even needed a sequel, did we? Really?
No. It's easy in hindsight, though.
Of course.
What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I agree. To the most part, I think it would have been best left alone as the one film. But we can ignore sequels, can't we? So we can ignore remakes. We can always don't forget the films that have been remade. Do you remember the remakes that haven't been very good? I mean, I don't.
Only The Wicker Man.
Only The Wicker Man.
It wasn't that bad. The Wicker Man wasn't that bad. I'll tell you, a really bad one was Dirty Dancing. That was atrocious. I haven't even watched it, and I know it's bad.
Hang on, they've remade Dirty Dancing?
TV movie. So
is Nicolas Cage in it? Because if he is, I'm watching.
He's not.
Yeah.
He's not. That's the only
Pirouetting.
Nicolas Cage was Baby, wasn't he?
No one puts Nick Cage or Baby in the corner.
No one puts Nick Cage in the corner.
If he did it, I would watch it, but only if he did it. No, I think it's best left. I think I didn't love the film when it was released. I liked it. I thought it was a great piece of work. I look back at it fondly with everything that was going on around. But I do that with every film. Every film I associate with a time in my life, and Kick-Ass is one of them. So fond memories. Glad I watched it today. It's worth.
You met me, Paul. I mean, doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. So everything's got its downside, hasn't it? So
what's not to like about me?
Oh no,
he's doing it again.
It's mask on there. It's time to go. Yeah.
Kick-Ass is back.
It's lovely to be on. Thank you for inviting me. It's been lovely to guest.
I'll be honest, Dave. You look more like a lizard than you do Kick-Ass. That head thing on. You do look like a lizard. Yeah.
Look, this is official merchandise from Kick-Ass 2, which I guess says it all, doesn't it? Look,
Can you see through that?
Yeah, it's got like a visor thing. Yeah.
It could be your quarantine suit when you go
I can sort of see through it.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my quarantine suit. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, guys, for being part of this. That was great. I think for me, exactly what Paul said. Kick-Ass is it's about a time in our lives, and it was a special time, especially of the history of Hey You Guys. So I'm sure no one can take me seriously wearing this. Scott definitely can't. So as I said, if you're let me take this off. Hello. If you're watching this after it's gone live, do like, subscribe, comment in the box below, and let us know your thoughts on Kickass. This has been really fun, and we'll hopefully do it again another time soon. So yeah, from all the guys, we will see you on whatever the next one is. So take care. See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.